Good evening, everybody. Thank you for hopping on for our pre-camp webinar before our Northeast Showcase Plus coming up on October 10th and 11th at St. John Vianney High School in Holmdel, New Jersey. Thank you all for taking the time this evening to join us and learn a bit more about what to expect at camp. Before we jump into the content, I want to go over a quick agenda. So first, we're going to do some quick introductions of some of the team that you'll be hearing from this evening on the webinar, and then also some of the team that you'll meet on site in New Jersey as well. Then we'll go into how to prepare for camp, both in terms of what to expect, schedule, logistics, programming, and also from a recruiting standpoint, what you can do to lay some groundwork with college coaches, follow up with them after camp, et cetera, how to use this to position your recruiting moving forward. And then as much of the evening as possible and as necessary is going to be dedicated to a live Q&A. You should see over in the GoToWebinar toolbar a little a questions tab. If you click in there, you can type in questions as they come up over the course of the evening. I'll be compiling those, and then we'll be answering them towards the end. I'll also be answering some over chat as over the course of the webinar, so feel free to fire away with your questions in there before we get to that Q&A section. First up, some intros. Jenna, would you like to introduce yourself?
I sure can. My name is Jenna Orlando. I oversee the operations for our Headfirst honor roll camps. After graduating from Lafayette College 3 years ago, where I was super lucky to have played softball all 4 years, I started working for the Headfirst companies. I took an opportunity to do a rotational program, which then pivoted me to focusing all of my time towards our honor roll camp division. I'm super pumped to see you all this weekend and get back on field on the softball side of things, and look forward to meeting you all in person soon.
And my name is Max McKenna. I'm our Senior Manager of Marketing within our Showcases division here at Headfirst. I played my college baseball at Amherst College, where I graduated in 2011. After that, I went into teaching and coaching at the high school level up in the New England area and in the Northeast for a handful of years before I came to Headfirst full-time in 2014, so just about 6.5 years ago or so. And really since then, I've been working very closely with this division and with families and ball players like your student athletes to advance their softball and baseball recruiting needs at the high academic colleges. Another member of our team who you'll be seeing and hearing a lot from on site at camp is our founder and president, Brendan Sullivan. Brendan went to Stanford, DC native, went to Stanford University where he played baseball, graduated after 3 years there and was drafted by the San Diego Padres, had a handful of years in minor league baseball, founded Headfirst in the off season there as one of his off season activities, started with a single pitching lesson and then grew from there into what it is today, really focused on high academic showcases for baseball and softball players who are looking to really unlock their potential at the next level. He'll be on site with us. He won't be joining us tonight in the webinar, but he'll be on site with us, and you'll be certainly having a lot of FaceTime with Brendan on site in New Jersey. Another person I'd love to introduce is our camp advisory partner, which is Diamond College Advisory Team, or DCAT. DCAT is a college advisory program that is really centered around helping student athletes in softball, baseball, and soccer maximize their opportunities at the next level and really optimize for their fit both on the field and in the classroom in their college experience. In New Jersey, we'll be joined by Bonnie Pettis, who is the DCAT softball director. Bonnie was a two-sport and all Ivy League athlete at Yale, where she played softball and basketball. She then went into college coaching on the softball side for a handful of years at UConn, Southern Colorado, head coach at Furman. Great coaching career there. She also, one of the most interesting bio bullet points that I have the pleasure of introducing of anybody on our red shirt team or that we get to introduce. She was the pitching coach for the Great Britain's women's national softball team, had 2 world championships in Beijing and Caracas. So softball has literally taken Bonnie around the world, an incredibly interesting depth of experience as a student athlete and as a college coach, and has really leveraged that experience to help softball players at the high school ranks make the transition to the college game and really optimize their potential fit there academically and athletically. Now we're going to dive into some of the logistics. So Jenna, could you take it away?
Yes, so we feel really happy to have been able to lock in St. John Vianney High School in Holmdel, New Jersey for next Saturday and Sunday, October 10th and 11th. To give you a sense of how much time you'll be spending at St. John Vianney High School, we've laid out the arrival times on this slide. What we've decided to do is split the camp in half. Therefore, for both days of camp, you'll either arrive in the morning or the afternoon wave. If you're in the AM wave, your check-in will begin at 7 a.m. on day 1 and on day 2. If you're in the PM wave, your check-in will begin at 12:15 on day 1, and at 12:30 on day 2. Each group can anticipate being on site for about 5 or 6 hours each day. To go into a little more depth on the wave assignments, we've decided to split that group, or the larger group, in order to limit the number of people on site for safety reasons. If you are assigned to the AM wave on day 1, this will also apply to day 2. With that being said, we understand there are hardline factors like travel plans that can impact which wave you'd like to be in. Within our pre-camp email that will be sent tomorrow, there will be a request form for you to just let us know if you do have travel plans that we need to accommodate for. Here we have an overhead view of St. John Vianney, where we'll be running this event. Our programming will take place on their JV and varsity softball players, or softball fields, which you can see right beneath the football field and then right beneath the baseball field on site. You can feel free to park in the lot identified here, and otherwise the nitty-gritty details of where you'll be when on site will be well communicated on site by our staff. Upon arrival at camp, every player will go through our fairly standard check-in process with the added element of increased safety protocols. A key instruction we will enforce on site during this time is that players will be the only people in the check-in line to limit the number of people in one area and maintain social distancing. We strongly encourage each player to wear a mask while waiting in line, just as our Headfirst staff will be wearing masks throughout check-in. And each player will get their temperature checked prior to entering the facility. Before you come to camp on Saturday, we have a few action items for you. You'll receive a pretty lengthy pre-camp email tomorrow, as I mentioned. However, it's super important for you to read through in its entirety, just so that you can complete these 3 items on your screen and ensure that you are super well prepared headed into camp. The first is the pre-screening form and informed consent that needs to be submitted prior to your arrival on site. The second is the activation of your Rapsodo account. Please go ahead to, when you receive the email prompting you to activate it, please do so. And the third is that we have a new Headfirst on-site app in 2020. So we recommend downloading this for additional content and on-site notifications. As far as field access and seating goes post check-in, we'll ask that parents try to stay out of the central field areas and within designated viewing areas on site that will communicate to you once you arrive, just so that we can really make sure we maintain social distancing among the players, the coaches, and our parents. An important detail stemming off of this is that parents should definitely bring their own chair for seating purposes.
In terms of the programming and schedule and what to expect, after check-in for each group, players will transition directly into an all-camp meeting where they'll hear from Brendan, they'll be introduced to our redshirt team, Jenna, myself, and others. That will give way as soon as the players are dismissed to go stretch and get loose and go through a dynamic warm-up with our redshirt team. We'll have a parents-only meeting that follows that all-camp meeting where parents can, again, set the expectation of what they're going to see over the next couple days, as well as get questions answered with Brendan on the microphone as well. Players, after they get loose, will go into the defensive showcase portion in the morning. They'll be grouped by their showcase position. Players can showcase at whatever position they want, whether that's their primary position, their secondary position. It does not matter to us. You can go, if you're listed as a middle infielder catcher, but you just feel kind of like an outfielder on October 10th, that is completely well and good. You can go with whatever position group you would like to. We do ask that players showcase with only one position group, which includes pitchers. So if you're a primary pitcher who has a secondary position, you may showcase either as a pitcher or at that secondary position, depending on how you feel. The group that you go with on day one will not impact your assigned pitching innings for the gameplay on day two, which we'll touch on in more detail shortly. Side by side with that showcase portion of the morning, where one position group at a time will be on the field with the college coaches, with the video. We'll also be running players through some objective assessments, things like 20-yard dash and overhand throwing velocity and broad jump, and some other athletic measurements that we'll be collecting to pass out to college coaches as part of that full athletic profile as well. After that defensive showcase, we'll transition into the offensive showcase. And again, players will remain with their positional groups to go through that showcase portion. Along with that showcase BP, which will take place on the field with those coaches watching, we will also be running players through another series of objective measurements with the Rapsodo measurements on their hitting, and blast on their hitting, and some other kind of advanced data and analytics that will round out their profile. After the offensive showcase, we'll then go to the dedicated pitcher showcase, which will also feature Rapsodo and video. This will be kind of a showcase bullpen, so to speak, with the Rapsodo unit set up, with the coaches watching, and we'll also be collecting video of those to, again, put into your player profile so that you can pass that out to college coaches. Coaches will receive that video and data as well. Camp on day one for each group will wrap up with a coach connection period, a little kind of skills practice that's position specific, and then a dedicated meet and greet time where players have the chance to meet the coaches that are on site. And we'll talk a little bit more in the engagement portion about how players can approach that to best help their recruiting process. Day two will be taken up by our simulated games. So as Jenna mentioned, day two arrival time will depend on your group assignment, which will be the same as it was on day one. Players within those groups will be assigned to teams, and each team, so each player will play in 2 7-inning games on day two. Our game rules are a little bit different. It's not just a traditional softball game where you run through and play 3 outs per inning and all that sort of stuff. We do play some different rules, with the purpose being to maximize action and really make sure that every player gets all the opportunities. So we play with a couple different modified rules. We start with a 1-1 count. We play as if there are always no outs in the field, so that players have the chance to turn 2 or tag up and score and go for the extra out, go for the extra base. And the batting order runs continuously as well. So there's not a leadoff hitter and a cleanup hitter. If the 7th hitter is the last batter of the first game, that means that batter number 8 in that lineup will lead off for game 2. We also play 6 batters per inning rather than playing 3 up, 3 down. We'll play, so 6 batters hit every inning. This evens out the opportunities both for the number of at-bats for hitters and also the number of batters faced for pitchers who are throwing in each inning as well. The teams are completely balanced by positional groups, so they're balanced by both primary and secondary defensive position. They don't take into account things like grad year or anything like that. Girls are going to be on teams with a mix of grad years to make sure that the positions on each team are really balanced, to make sure that we're maximizing their opportunities in the field. In addition to that gameplay, there also will be some additional programming on day two. There will be, before each group's first pitch of their first game, there will be a panel Q&A for parents where myself and Bonnie Pettis from DCAT answer your guys' questions about the recruiting process, what's next in it for your daughter, for your student athlete. It'll be a pretty free-flowing Q&A portion during that to make sure that you guys have the answers that you guys need. And then also the day will wrap up after each group's second game. There'll be an additional coach connection period for players to connect directly with college coaches. For group 1, we expect that day 2 will end by 12:30 p.m. And then for group 2, the camp day will wrap up by 6 p.m. on day 2. Again, as Jenna mentioned, if you have specific travel plans, feel free to let us know in that pre-camp email and that form that will circulate tomorrow, and we can make sure that we get your daughter assigned to the group that is going to work best with your travel plans.
Great. There are a few notes to run through related to equipment on site. The first being that this is an all natural grass and dirt facility, so players can wear metal, rubber, or molded spikes. But we do ask to just bring turfs or sneakers because we may ask players to put these on for some of the programming that may take place or that will take place on site. The second is that to eliminate the sharing of equipment, Headfirst will not provide helmets in dugouts. So please make sure to bring your own helmet to camp. As far as bats go, just ensure that they meet the current high school regulations. In 2020, a huge part of us delivering the most valuable experience that we can to all of you is making sure that we are running as safely as we can. This year, we have advanced at camp safety protocols that will be enforced and can also be accessed in their entirety on our website. A few important notes that we'd just like to draw your attention to and would really appreciate you all complying to. On site, social distancing will be enforced in an effort to maintain social distancing as best we can. We will not be using any dugouts, and instead we'll have players use the foul lines for their equipment. Masks, while they're not mandatory, especially during times of physical exertion, they will be strongly encouraged among players. As mentioned earlier, we will be taking temperatures upon arrival at camp each day and having each participant complete a pre-screening form. Just like attendees, our Headfirst staff will complete a screening and will be strongly encouraged to wear a mask, especially during check-in. Of course, a hallmark of our experience is coach engagement. And while this may look different this year, it will still happen. With that being said, it's just going to be done very responsibly. We encourage players and coaches to wear masks, interact at a distance, and avoid any physical contact, such as handshakes, throughout the entirety of camp. PPE and sanitizer will be available if needed on site, and as mentioned when discussing our waived arrivals, the group sizes will be limited throughout the entire experience.
Awesome, and now we're going to transition into how to approach this camp from an engagement and recruiting perspective as well. And when I think about preparing for camp from your recruiting perspective, I separate it into three different chunks. There's before camp from now until October 10th. There's at camp October 10th and 11th. And then there's October 12th on, the follow-up after camp. Between now and when we see you at St. John Vianney on October 10th, what I recommend student athletes do is take a look through the school list that we have on our website. Take a look at the schools that are going to be on site with us, as well as the schools that are part of that direct digital access database who will be receiving all of your at-camp video and data after camp. And do some email outreach to them. If you are really interested in MIT, send Coach Coleman an email before you see her at camp and say, hey, Coach Coleman, I'm really excited to see you on October 10th at St. John Vianney at the Headfirst Showcase Plus. I'm really interested in MIT because of X, Y, and Z. Sending some of these emails before you meet these coaches face-to-face can really help you lay some groundwork. And so when you see them at camp, you can say, hey, Coach, it's really good to meet you face-to-face. I sent you an email. I'm really interested in X school. And it allows you gives you kind of an entry point into that conversation. At camp, the key, as Jenna mentioned on the last slide with regards to safety protocols, is about engagement. It's really time on those 2 days to engage with the college coaches that are on site and are physically present. Now, again, this looks different in 2020 than it has in the past. The picture that used to go with the slide that I had to delete was a player shaking hands with a coach, which that idea remains present. You want to introduce yourself to these coaches. You want to get to know them. You want to have some of these face-to-face conversations. But as you mentioned, we're going to be having them in a different manner than we previously had. This does not mean that it's something that should be incredibly difficult for student athletes to do. We know that having those conversations with college coaches at your dream schools can be really intimidating for young student athletes who are starting this process. And so there's a lot of Headfirst support from Jenna, myself, Brendan, the rest of our redshirt team is always there to help players start those conversations. And then a really big piece of this is the camp programming that we've built out really allows for a lot of organic engagement between players and coaches. As we talked about, there's those meet and greets on each day of camp. There is the positional practice, which will give a lot of direct face-to-face engagement with the college coaches. And then during each player's games, there are coaches assigned to those fields. And so it allows a lot of conversations to start up organically around the game of softball. That ball's hit deep to the right field corner, and the right fielder digs it out and throws it in. And then the middle infielder has a conversation with the coach that's on their field saying, hey, what we just did was this, how we ran that double cut. How do you coach that in your program? And you can kind of start a lot of those around the game of softball, which is much easier sometimes than saying, hey, coach, I'm really interested in your school. What do you think? Really key this year, always true and always a really key point is the follow-up after camp, but especially this year. This year, I think that it's really important that student athletes take that video and data that we'll collect at camp and use that to help follow up with college coaches, both who they met on site and also who aren't able to be off-campus recruiting, whether it's because of school-specific travel restrictions or because of the ongoing NCAA Division I dead period. It's really important in the weeks after camp to send some of those emails. Use that video that we'll give to you after camp, send that out to coaches with a personalized note to schools that are on your list, and use that to introduce yourself, create an excuse to email these coaches, follow up with them, and then really start some of those conversations digitally as well. We're really happy with the chunk of schools that are able to be there in person. You'll see there on the left side of the screen some really, really excellent schools, again, because of the geography, mainly focused around the Northeast. But some great schools coming from all over the place. In addition to these schools that you see here on your screen, there's a handful of others, and there also are a couple coaches coming from schools which can't be listed by name because of league-specific restrictions. But take a look at our website, a full list of those coaches who will be there in person. In addition to those ones who will be there in person, you see here on the right side of your screen just a sample of the 100-plus total college coaches who will have direct digital access to all of the data, all of the video from camp. And this includes, as you might expect, a lot of Division I programs that currently are unable to recruit off campus or on campus face-to-face because of the Division I dead period. And so they have transitioned. If you look at Harvard or BC or Georgetown or Princeton or Stanford, they have transitioned a lot of their recruiting digitally. And so this will be one touch point for them to have all of your video, all of your data, and then, as I mentioned, the importance of student athletes following up with these schools that aren't able to be there in person in the weeks after camp will also be crucial to advancing your recruiting process.
We have a couple key partnerships that we want to highlight for your use and benefit. Our first being our hotel partner. So for travel accommodations, we partner with On Peak. So families can book directly through their platform in order to get the best hotel rates in the area. You can learn more through our website by just going to the Enrolled Athletes tab and then clicking into travel and accommodations for our softball events. NextPro is our awesome video partner who records, tags, and distributes every pitch and at bat from camp to our college coaches. NextPro collects defensive showcase and game footage on your player, and that will be sent to coaches even if you do not pay for their video packages. However, you can buy access to have this footage in your own hands and to distribute on your own terms.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. And now we're going to transition into the live Q&A portion of the evening. As I mentioned up top, you can find that questions tab over in the, there's a questions tab over in the GoToWebinar toolbar. I know a handful of you have already found it, and so we can start with those. But if you have any questions at all, feel free to fire them in, and we'll transition to those now. I will say, if you have a question but you have to jump off, or there's something else that comes up, feel free to to drop that question in there. And then if you have to go make dinner or go about your evening, this is certainly not your first, last, only chance to get your questions answered. You can always take a look. You can send us an email. If you pop onto our website, we have a live chat feature that will let you chat live with one of our Headfirst team members. And there's also, you can reach out to us by phone. And there's also some great resources on our Headfirst blog as well. So you can take a look. There's some articles about how to best prepare for camp and how to start conversations with college coaches and stuff like that. Jenna, the first couple questions that have come in are about some of the video, and which I totally get, because we mentioned video in a couple different ways. It's really important to the crux of this camp and what we're giving to players and college coaches. Could you outline what those different portions of video are? What do players get included? What would be those add-on pieces of video through NextPro? And then what are college coaches delivered in that kind of whole video package as well?
Yes. So first, to just go back to NextPro for a bit. NextPro, for your at-camp experience, will collect all of the defensive showcase video and the game footage. If you pay, then you have that in your hands if you pay for a specific video package. If not, still, all of that video will wind up in the coach's hands. So it gets basically put into this portal where then coaches could filter through, and they'll receive access to that video about 10 business days after camp. And then if you decide to purchase a video package through NextPro, it's similar in that like you allow like 10 business days or so to receive that video from on site. We as Headfirst collect your offensive showcase video and your pitcher showcase video if you choose to showcase as a pitcher. In addition, we collect data from both of those showcases. At the end of camp, we essentially compile all of that information into little player folders, and it's really just within Google Drive. So they're folders specific to each player at camp that you will receive access to your own folder so that you can send that video out, see it, see the data, compile it into whatever you would like in order to send it out to coaches. And we also provide a PDF that is branded and pretty nicely formatted so that you could spit that off in an email as well to coaches at the conclusion of the event. Coaches, their access is basically within this big Google sheet that has all of the players in attendance and links out to those folders. So it outlines each player's personal information, all of their academic information, and also includes links to those folders for them to be able to access in one place.
Absolutely. I think just to double down on that all access in one place thing, I think that's one key thing that we're hearing from coaches is the idea of just logging into one place and seeing all this video and all this data that is tagged to specific players that they know. They don't have to scroll through live stream or hours and hours of tournament footage because everything is tagged to each individual player is really key to help them be efficient in their recruiting. This is because we're collecting video in a couple different ways, and there are different there's the NextPro payment package, there's what coaches get. I totally understand that there are questions around this, and if you guys have follow-up questions about that, more than happy to answer those as well. But I think Jenna laid that out really nicely. Jenna, one more that I'm going to send directly your way as well, and I think you know what's coming. These are, we're talking about being on site for 5 or 6 hours a day. What's the water and food situation so that these student athletes can make sure that they're fueled up for their softball action?
Absolutely. So in terms of foods, unfortunately, there isn't a concession stand that will be open on site. But the good part about this kind of waived arrival is that you really shouldn't be on site like through 2 meals throughout the day. But if you are seeking some local options within that mobile app that I referenced earlier, there will be a tab that just can point you in the direction of some food, some caffeine if needed, and near and close by. As far as water goes, that is an important question because on site we will not have any like shared water jugs. So highly recommend you bringing as much water as you can, but we will also have coolers filled with single-use waters in case any players run out of their own and need some extra water on site.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. And One question that I'm gonna take myself is about kind of the data. We mentioned blast motion and Rapsodo for pitching and for hitting. What is kind of the value of that data, and how can players best use that? And I think that those are two really good parts of different parts of that question. One is that the value of this data is twofold. One is it's the fact that it's coming from Headfirst, and it means that for college coaches, it's a verified video, it's verified data that they know that they can trust. It's not, just it didn't take you 2 hours to get to that one batted ball velocity, right? It coming from a trusted third party just means that coaches really can know and trust what they're getting from us. It also gives coaches a lot of insight into who you are as a player. Rather than just seeing the video, they're going to watch the video and they're going to give you the eye test and they're going to say, oh, she looks like she can hit. Then the depth of data from the Rapsodo, from the blast motion swing analysis, they're going to be able to say, oh, here's the data that backs up what I'm seeing with my eyes. And so it just gives them a little bit more comfort and depth into the insights that they can give or get from the video, and when they're looking at you as a player. The other really important part with this data, though, is student athletes using it to get better as well. And this is where I think sometimes student athletes can get tripped up, because when you look at that Rapsodo PDF for the first time, or you look at that blast motion PDF for the first time, there are going to be parts of it where you're like, this might as well be written in Greek. I do not know what this is saying. I think that taking the time to educate yourself a little bit on what this data means, and any role that we can play on to help that, we're more than happy to do. It gives players a really good sense of who they are and how they can continue to improve their game as well. You can look at your blast data and you can get a sense of your swing, and here's where it stands currently. And then also, here's the piece that will give me the biggest boost to my game in the short term. It might be the rotational forces I'm generating. It might be my attack angle. Whatever the case may be, it's going to be different for each student athlete. But I think that it's really important that student athletes take this data not just as something that they're giving to college coaches to aid in their recruiting, which it certainly does and certainly will help them in their recruiting, but also to take it as a piece of feedback and something that they can use to instruct themselves as they continue to grow in the game of softball as well. Jenna, one final question's come in, and we'll see if a couple more come in. One that I would put out to you that I'm curious for your take on, that I might tag in, is connecting with college coaches on site. What are some tips that you give to student athletes to start these conversations with their dream school when they have the chance, either on the field or during the coach connection period or during the practice or at any point during camp?
Yes, I think the biggest piece is really making sure that you're advocating for yourself and you are willing to take advantage of the coaches that are on site. There is no denying that it is a smaller list than maybe you even originally signed up for, but it is a really solid list of coaches that if you need to get out of your comfort zone, I would suggest doing it, because it's 2 days that they're all going to be in one place for you to take advantage of conversations with. The other piece that I would like to just stress is really play to maximize your strengths as an athlete and as a student. Don't put any added weight on your shoulders to play outside of the player you are, or talk in a personality that you are not. The more comfortable with and confident you are in your own brand, the better you'll be able to perform, not only as an athlete, but as a person and in your interactions with the coaches. It's important to remember coaches are looking for unique fits within their program. So there is no one tailor-made player that all coaches are expecting you to be. So I think those are my biggest pieces of advice when going into conversations next weekend.
I think that's absolutely right. And just to double down on that last bit, I think that what's so important at the schools that we work with is sometimes, overlooked in the recruiting process. Yes, Coach Coleman at MIT absolutely wants to recruit girls who can hit the ball hard, who can run fast, who can throw hard, all these things, right? They want to recruit the best softball players that they can. They also are recruiting the holistic student athlete. They're looking for, is this player going to be the right fit on my team culture? Are they going to help be a leader in my program? Are they going to make the girls on the team around them better over the course of 4 years as well? And I think that any chance that you have to communicate that to a college coach with your maturity, with your thoughtfulness, with your active engagement in the process, I think can really go a long way. The other thing that I always highlight is, these coaches are theoretically doing what they're doing because they love the game of softball. It meant a lot to them at some point in their lives. It still does. They love the game of softball just as you guys as student athletes love the game of softball. And so I think that starting these conversations on site around the game of softball is a much more comfortable way for a 16, 17-year-old softball player to start some of these conversations, rather than walking up to a coach and saying, thinking, you're the coach at my dream school, do you like me or not? If you start that conversation around the sport of softball, about a piece of feedback on your swing, or, I just threw this drop ball that just got hit into the gap, what tip do you have on how to throw that pitch to be more effective? Starting around the game of softball, I think, can really lessen the burden of starting some of those conversations as well. One final question that did come in, Jenna, that I'll toss over to you is, during the pitcher showcase, what does that look like? Are pitchers throwing to a catcher? Are they throwing into a backstop? What's kind of the setup during that pitcher showcase on day one?
Yeah, they all will be paired up with a catcher. During the end of the offensive showcase, pitchers will start to get warm on one field and start to kind of pair up with some catchers, and catchers will recycle after going through the showcase. But basically, the showcase will take place on that field that was just beneath the football field. We'll have about 2 mounds set up, actually, since like along the foul line, with some screens behind for coaches to stand behind the catcher for a good view. But yes, they will be following a pitch, like a sequence of pitches that we'll lay out for them as we collect Rapsodo, so that can be really well built out data, and it will roll through that way.
Yeah, and I think that one thing to add there is that the coaches will be watching. The coaches that are in attendance will also be watching during that. And I think that one interesting thing is they get to put their eyeballs on it live, and then they also, after the fact, get this video and data to, again, kind of spot check what they were seeing live on the field as well. That brings us to the end of the questions that we have that have come in. As I mentioned, this is certainly not the last chance that you have to get your questions answered. If anything comes up between now and the start of camp, always please feel free to touch base with us, whether it's on our live chat function on the website, via email, via phone. We're really looking forward to seeing you all in a week or so in New Jersey, and looking forward to meeting some of you guys face to face. Stay tuned for that, as Jenna mentioned, that unfortunately long but important pre-camp email that will be coming your way tomorrow. That email tomorrow will include a recording of this webinar, so if there are pieces that you want to go back to refresh yourself on or anything like that, feel free to spin through that as well. And we look forward to seeing you on October 10th. Thank you for joining us this evening.